All right, welcome back to Miss Paraso and Miss Achilles video series. Today we're learning about adding and subtracting polynomials. So since you already watched a video about what polynomials are, I'll skip explaining that part and we'll get right to the adding and subtracting. So go ahead and take a moment, pause the video, and write this example down because this is the example we're going to work with. Okay, welcome back. So let's get some of these steps written down, and like we said, they're not necessarily in a certain order, but you definitely always want to do the distributive property first. So you look to see if anything can be distributed. So for example, do I see anything in front of here?
I don't see anything, Miss Paraso.
So there's no distributing there, but then do you see anything in front of here?
I see it too.
So that needs to be distributed, and I need to pay careful attention that it's actually a positive 2 that I am distributing because it's a plus 2. So notice that we wrote in here including the subtraction sign. So if it's an addition sign, you don't have to worry too much because a positive 2 and 2 are the same thing. So after you've taken care of distributing, what you're going to do is you're going to combine like terms. And hopefully remember that like terms are terms that have like variables, as in they're both x's, with like exponents. Those are the ones that we'll combine. Lastly, remember to put your final answer in standard form, so refer to your previous notes if you have already forgotten what standard form is. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and try this example. So if you haven't gotten all of these steps written down, make sure you write them down before we try the example. Alright, so here is example 1. So now we're going to try this. So Miss Achilles, what did I say I needed to do first?
Distribute.
You are correct.
Yes.
So I have a 2 here, so I'm going to distribute it to both terms. So 2 times 5x squared is 10x squared, and 2 times a negative 3 is a negative 6. So remember that when you're multiplying, you need to remember that that's like a negative 3, and then I bring down a negative 6, which is just like a minus 6. Now, I can bring down the plus sign here, and I can bring down the 3x squared and the 4x.
Shouldn't you bring down the parentheses?
Since I already distributed, I don't really need those parentheses, and since there was nothing to distribute out here, I can just go ahead and drop those parentheses.
Okay.
So now, if you remember, the second thing we said to do is to
combine like terms.
Okay, so I'm going to look, and I see a 3x squared, and notice I'm taking the plus sign with it, so I know that I'm actually adding those. So that's 13x squared, and then I see a 4x here, so I write plus 4x, and then lastly I see a minus 6. Now, Miss Achilles, do you know why I wrote it in that order?
Because you need the exponents to be written in descending order.
Exactly. So standard form is x squared, then x to the 0, or we don't see the x there. So that will be your final answer in standard form. And before you ask this question, if we'll take points off if it's not in standard form, yes, we will.
Yes.
So make sure it's in standard form. Here we are on example number 2. So if you remember, first I am going to
distribute.
So this time I can see that I have a 2x times x and a 2x times negative 5. So you have to remember your exponent rules. So 2x times x is 2x
squared.
Yay! And 2x times a negative 5 is a negative 10x, or minus 10x. Now, remember on that first slide what we said, that if there's a minus sign, you need to distribute that with it. So this means it's negative 3 times a positive 2x, which gives me a negative 6x. Don't forget it has to be distributed to both, so now that's a negative 3 to a positive 7x squared, which would be negative 21x squared. Now I look, and I see what can be combined. So I see here's a 2x squared, and again I'm taking the sign with it. That's a negative 21x squared, so that gives me negative 19x squared. Then I see what else I can combine, and make sure you take the sign with it. Negative 10x and negative 6x would be negative 16x. And that is my final answer in standard form because I have the x squared and then the x.
Ms. Parasite, I think you did a really great job with that problem.
Thank you. I made sure to remember to distribute before I combine like terms, so that's really the key. All right, so first I'm going to
distribute.
Yes. All right, so we have 15x, negative 6. Now,
But wait, you said negative 6, but that looks like a subtraction sign.
You're right, but remember that it's a 3 times a negative 2, which is a negative 6. So a negative 6 and a minus 6, it really comes out looking the same way.
I remember that now.
All right, so right here you might think, oh, there's nothing to distribute, so I can just drop the parentheses. But if there's a negative sign, I do need to distribute that negative. If it helps you, what could I put in front of there, Miss Achilles?
A 1?
A 1, right? So I can always add a 1 because that doesn't change the problem. And now that might help you to remember that you have to distribute this negative sign or negative 1 to all the terms. So that means it's going to be a negative 4x squared and a negative 1 times a negative 3x is
plus
going to be
3x.
You got it. And a negative 1 times a negative 2.
Positive 2.
Exactly.
Which is the same as plus 2.
Exactly. So, now you can see what happens when you distribute the negative, and that's probably one of the most common mistakes that students make is they forget that this negative has to go to all 3 terms. So lastly, I'm going to combine like terms. So I look first for the highest exponent, which is 4x squared. There's no other squares. Then I'm going to look for the x's. So I've got a 15 and a 3, so that's 18x. And lastly, I combine a negative 6, so make sure to take the sign. So a negative 6 and a positive 2 is?
Negative 4.
And that is my final answer.
So what do we really want to make sure they don't forget?
Well, most importantly, they need to make sure that they're always distributing if it's a subtraction sign. And also that answer should always be written in standard form, which is descending exponent. So x squared goes first, and then x, and then a constant term that has no x.
Cool.
All right, thank you so much. Here is the same example from the first slide. So remember, Miss Achilles, what did we say we're going to do first?
Distribute.
Distribute. So that means this 2 needs to be distributed to both things inside of the parentheses.
Time out. Okay.
Yeah. I realized that. I was like, why is this just
You want me to just erase it and write it real quick?
I was like, I know that did not just say 5 and 2. I was
Edit the video here.
disastrous. What's happening today?
I don't know.